Hello everyone, welcome to the Street Crime UK YouTube channel. Thank you for joining us. Please don't forget to like, share and subscribe for more content. Today we take a look at a man who has been described by some as a muscle-obsessed stalker. This man, it has been alleged, has been harassing young men and boys to feel and measure their muscles since at least the 1980s, and with deadly consequences. Akinwale Arobieke was born on July 15, 1961, at Crumpsall Hospital in Crumpsall, Manchester. His mother, Abisola Arobieke, was a secretarial student and his father is unknown. At the age of only 6 months, he entered the foster care system. He spent time in Barnardo's home in Llandudno in Conwy, but would later move to Liverpool. But this seemingly normal and uneventful early years didn't give a true representation of the monster that was soon to come. In the 1980s, Mr. Arobieke turned his attention to Gary Kelly, a 16-year-old athlete from Birkenhead. He would follow him around and ask to feel his muscles. Eventually, the young man would become so disturbed that he went to the police. The officers already had a picture of Mr. Arobieke ready to be identified, which Gary Kelly promptly did. Mr. Arobieke was served with a harassment order, and he wasn't allowed near the area in which Mr. Kelly and his family lived. But this tale wouldn't end with that. While at a swimming pool with his friends, Mr. Kelly would catch sight of Mr. Arobieke. Terrified, he bolted from his friends, desperate to get away from the man who had been stalking him. He tried to evade the man ducking around the crowds, but Mr. Arobieke had seen him and allegedly started following him. Panicked, Mr. Kelly had attempted to evade him by hiding in New Brighton's railway station, hiding in a stationary train before wandering around the platform waiting for the coast to be clear. When he saw Mr. Arobieke again, he made a bid to escape by crawling under a train, and accidentally touched a live rail. Gary Kelly was electrocuted to death, having only been trying to escape the person he should have been safe from in the first place. He left behind a 3-month pregnant girlfriend. During the sentencing, an additional 12 alleged offences were gathered to lie on file in order to keep track of any patterns that would and did emerge. Mr. Arobieke was convicted of manslaughter. However, this was overturned only a few years later. He argued that there wasn't any law against standing and watching the trains, and no evidence to confirm that he had actually been chasing the teenager down. Mr. Arobieke also complained of the racist overtones in the case from the prosecution and the officers involved, and was given £35,000 in compensation after a Home Office investigation in 1989. Mr. Arobieke would only spend 2.5 years in prison for his manslaughter charge. In the following years, it wouldn't be his only run-in with the law, nor would it be the only time his threats were taken at face value. In March of 1997, an article was run by the Sunday People detailing how warnings had been issued to rugby teams after Mr. Arobieke focused his attentions on some of the players. He was accused of gaining information of players' addresses from a fake press pass. He attacked players' houses, vandalised their cars and threatened them with violence. One player complained to the club that Mr. Arobieke had lifted him off the ground and actually was doing squats with him on his shoulders. Another claimed that the man had thrown a brick through his window. The police were notified, but he evaded another prison sentence. When she was 13 in the year 2000, Kelly Mullany lived with her family, including her younger brother. Whilst walking to the park one time, Mr. Arobieke attempted to talk to Mullany's brother and feel his muscles, and she threatened to call the police on him. But this wasn't to end with just that. 30 minutes later, arriving back to their home, rapid banging at the door startled Kelly Mullany. When she looked out the window and saw it was Mr. Arobieke, who demanded that she come outside, she refused. He then greeted her with a gun pushed through the mailbox, and the 6-foot 5-inch man screaming, "You're fucking dead, you're dead, you're dead." Petrified, the teenage girl called the police, who arrived with 6 police vehicles. Mr. Arobieke was arrested for threatening to kill, but no traces of a gun were ever found. While he denied any wrongdoings, he acknowledged that his actions could be perceived as threatening, even though he had been approaching them out of want of genuine friendship, or at least so he claimed. He was jailed for 30 months at Warrington Crown Court on August 3rd, 2001. But Miss Mullany still didn't feel safe. Mr. Arobieke's words still rattling around inside her head. She entered a witness protection program and moved halfway across the country. After Mr. Arobieke was convicted of harassment and threatening to kill Miss Mullany, Merseyside police launched an investigation into his behaviour, dubbing it Operation Ice. Over 120 people were interviewed, and a disturbing pattern quickly started to emerge. Mr. Arobieke would wait outside gyms, sports clubs and colleges until finding a suitable target, namely muscular young men. He would approach them and ask to feel their muscles or watch them squat, and he wouldn't leave until they would let him do so. Mr. Arobieke even carried a tape measure around to measure the calves, thighs and chests of his victims. When he had his sights set on a particular boy, he would grow obsessive and start showing up wherever they were, learning private details of their lives and their families. A family entered into a witness protection program after Mr. Arobieke wouldn't leave their son alone. And when the police searched Mr. Arobieke's home, they found numerous pictures of muscular men and the personal details of over a dozen victims, including phone numbers and their body measurements. The investigation would end with Mr. Arobieke pleading guilty to 15 separate counts of harassment and witness intimidation. An astonishing 61 counts of harassment were also alleged, but weren't pursued during the case. 31 restraining orders were granted by the judge to protect the young men and witnesses that had been named during the case. On December 15, 2003, Mr. Arobieke was jailed for 6 years. His reign of terror didn't end there either now he was in prison. Multiple inmates came forward to say that Mr. Arobieke had demanded to measure their biceps with a shoelace, but the man denied the accusations were true, saying that they were baseless. No matter how unfounded these accusations were, Mr. Arobieke was moved 14 times because of them. Following the release of Mr. Arobieke from prison in 2006, the Merseyside police appealed for an interim sexual offences prevention order against him, and it was considered unusual as he had never been convicted of a sex offence, and denied getting sexual gratification from touching muscles, but it was still granted due to the cases that had been ordered to lie on file. Under the Sexual Offences Prevention Order, he was not allowed to feel people's muscles, ask them to do exercises in public, or approach any young person under the age of 18. It also banned him from St Helens, Warrington, and Widnes without the permission of either the Chief Constable of Merseyside or the Chief Constable of Cheshire. He was also banned from loitering around or entering gyms and sports clubs. The SOPO order was originally meant to be temporary, but it was made permanent by Judge Bruce McMillan in 2007. His reasoning was that it was clear that his touching of boys and young men is motivated by a sexual urge. Mr. Arobieke admitted that he had an unhealthy obsession with muscles and the potential of young men to improve their physique, but still denied that it was sexual. No matter what his intentions were, the SOPO order strictly forbade any contact with minors or asking men to feel their muscles. It quickly became apparent that this was outside of what Mr. Arobieke could or would be willing to do. On May 25, 2007, Mr. Arobieke breached the SOPO order by approaching a young man and touching his bicep after travelling to Preston, Lancashire, and he was jailed for a further 15 months. Later, in the summer of 2008, Mr. Arobieke would be back in court as he tried to appeal the Sexual Offences Protection Order, claiming that he had been through counselling that had helped him realise what he was doing, and he apologised to the victims, saying that if I am towering over them and I am a big black man, they may not really be consenting, they may be consenting out of fear. Despite the claims, he still showed erratic and unstable behaviour during the court proceedings, and the judge upheld the SOPO order. The second confirmed breach of the SOPO order was in April of 2009, not long after the SOPO order had actually been upheld by the court. Arobieke accosted a frightened 17-year-old boy in Birkenhead, trying to feel his biceps. He was jailed for 18 months, and it was his 72nd confirmed offence. Another 2.5 years were slapped onto Arobieke after he breached the SOPO order again by touching the muscles of a 16-year-old boy in Llandudno, North Wales. Mr. Arobieke defended himself in court, arguing that it was all a hoax. The police received several calls a day saying that I am in locations across the country, even when I'm in prison. Unswayed, the judge found him guilty. In August of 2013, Mr. Arobieke started to win his court cases. He was cleared of all charges relating to his breaking of his SOPO order after defending himself, claiming that it was nothing more than a modern-day witch hunt. He was partly able to prove his point because of the mishandling of the case on the part of the officers, who, desperate to prove his guilt, had approached an alleged victim before the 16-year-old had been ready to come forward. The police also continuously referred to him as Purple Aki. The nickname itself is inherently racist. The purple is derived from people saying he is so black he's practically purple, and this misconduct on the part of the police force became a foreboding cloud that only weakened their case against Mr. Arobieke. Another case in October of 2013 collapsed when it surfaced that the officer involved had been provoking Mr. Arobieke and made other questionable conduct decisions. And Mr. Arobieke wasn't charged. However, he had been forced to spend up to close to 2 years on remand awaiting charges that would inevitably be dropped, or that he was acquitted from. Mr. Arobieke was inevitably charged with breaking his SOPO order once again on the 1st of October 2015. Calling himself Andy, he had met a student on a train and asked to feel and measure his biceps. The student wouldn't realise who he had been talking to until a month later when he read an article on Mr. Arobieke. Despite claiming that it was a setup by the police, he was convicted by a unanimous jury decision. Eventually, Mr. Arobieke would have his sexual offences protection order lifted. In May 2016 at Manchester Crown Court, Judge Richard Mansell said that there was no justifiable proof that Arobieke obtained sexual gratification from feeling his victim's muscles, and that order restrictions could no longer be justified. Now, the name Purple Aki has become an urban legend in the UK underworld. Parody accounts of him can be found across all social media. There's an Instagram page dedicated to him wanting to legalise cannabis, and a Twitter profile with his face photoshopped onto a naked muscular man. Most of the fear that once surrounded him has faded away, and to many he's nothing more than a local boogeyman. But the question still remains, is this an act of taking a predator's power away, or is it laced with racism overtones that will do more damage than good?